Is flooding the field, though, a good strategy, Don, or is it taking away from policies that Donald Trump could potentially win with? I mean, talking about really focusing on the economy, really focusing on immigration, as Yvonne was saying, really maybe focusing on Afghanistan. He obviously shoulders some of the blame for setting that plan into motion. But even still, he could try to put it all on the Biden administration. Instead, the first question out of my mouth today is RFK and a dead whale that he chainsawed in half.
Yeah, listen, let's be very clear about something. RFK is an extraordinarily oddly constructed human being. It does not resonate with everyday Americans to, sever a whale head and carry it around the Northeast, or to kill a bear, or to talk about chemtrails and anti-vaxxing. Tulsi Gabbard has been a woman without a country for no less than 10 years in Democratic politics. She honorably served her country, but when the Democratic Party didn't give her a vacant Senate seat when she was elected to Congress out of Hawaii, she went off the rails very, very quickly. So this is not a person who has been relevant to Democratic constituencies for some time. I get it. It's a woman of color, and it's a Kennedy, but it does not add to Donald Trump's campaigns as a substantive addition. In fact, it's quite strange. All things considered, what it's not is substantive policy. And that's something that we've not seen from Donald Trump for 10 years now. We've seen division. We've seen wedge social issues. We've seen name calling and bloviating. But we still haven't seen tax returns. We still haven't seen a health care plan. We still haven't seen anything about how he's going to make things more affordable. He just says he will. So adding to these, adding these fringe characters in American politics, like Elon Musk, like the folks that come from this all-in podcast think tree, doesn't help him, particularly in the next 70 days.
This is an unprecedentedly short campaign. And Aaron, you're writing about this. If we want to move over to focus on Harris a little bit, she's got a sprint until November. Do you think that the lack of time helps her or hurts her?
Well, I think that there are advantages and disadvantages to this collapsed calendar, right? I mean, I think that the immediate kind of sense of urgency and excitement and having kind of this dramatic exit of President Biden and this dramatic entry of Vice President Harris as the candidate and now the official nominee is something that is motivating a lot of people and is generating a lot of excitement and curiosity about who she is and kind of what she plans to do for the country. So there is that. There is also, kind of this collapsed calendar that leaves very little room for error, as I write in my column this week. So, there's not a lot of time to recover if there is a mistake made. I mean, up to this point, the launch of her campaign has been pretty successful. And yet, people are kind of looking for, when is that first kind of misstep going to happen and how does she respond to that? I think that's also why you're seeing so much attention around who and when this first interview is going to be with, because that is certainly something that could be a potential challenge. She's been the candidate for just a little over a month, and yet we're already saying, when is she going to do an interview? Why hasn't she done an interview yet? I mean, we're talking 4 weeks in and the official nominee for just a few days now.
Does she need to do an interview? What sort of journalist does it need to be? What does she have to show to the American public? And does she need to choose someone in particular to get that done? Aaron.
Yeah, I mean, look, we don't know with whom or exactly when this is going to be, but obviously this is another huge mile marker in the campaign. As vice president, she did something like 30 or 40 interviews, but they were not necessarily with members of the press corps or the people who cover her kind of regularly. She's had a lot of kind of viral moments with, shows like Jimmy Kimmel or Drew Barrymore, but obviously those are not traditional journalists, but they are people who have the kinds of audiences who are also voters that she is trying to speak to directly. But, I think what I would say is that, talking to a journalist who has covered her leadership, as well as the kinds of issues that voters really care about, whether that's affordability or rights or democracy or immigration, that also matters. I happen to know one, if they're looking for one. Obviously, we're all kind of very interested in that. But the American people are already seeing a lot of her up to this point. And I think she's been pretty focused on kind of introducing herself to them. But this is certainly the next step in what that introduction can look like.
So, David, we talked about, just in the open of the show, a number of the issues that Harris is campaigning on or putting out ads on. And one of them is the economy. Another is immigration. And with the news that Texas is temporarily blocking that immigration policy from Biden, how can she eat into Donald Trump's lead, Republican lead on immigration?
Yes, and on the economy, and it starts by sitting down and doing interviews and telling the story. I think Vice President Harris, with the leadership of Joe Biden, they have a good story to tell. On the economy, more people went to work this morning than ever before. The stock market's at an all-time high. Home ownership remains at all-time highs. Access to health care and education, investments in infrastructure. The story is fantastic. Inflation's coming down and real wages are going up. Get that message out there. And on immigration, sure, the initiative may have been temporarily stopped, but the reality is after the Biden-Harris administration first negotiated a bipartisan immigration deal that Trump killed and then took executive action, we saw border apprehensions and border crossings come down. The problem with not having that conversation is Donald Trump gets to make these accusations, and it is hard to respond to those accusations just in 28-second commercials. You really have to change the national narrative. Republicans will win on immigration by the numbers. We know that. The question is by how much? And the opportunity for the vice president to eat into that lead is real, and it's right in front of her right now.
And you believe she can do that in an interview with a journalist?
Look, I think we should have every reason to believe that she would show a commanding presence in an interview. But the longer this goes without one, there's more questions that are naturally going to fill this space. She must be able to sit down with a sober, serious reporter, do a Lester Holt interview, or with Aaron or anybody else, you, Katie, and answer questions. What changed in some of your policy positions from 2019 until now? Did you have a role in the administration's execution of the Afghanistan policy? What do you think about the future of inflation? What do you think about our engagement in India or with China or with Russia? Have the give and take with a reporter. It's almost less about what she answers than how she answers, to show the command that we saw at the convention when she's pushed in real time by a serious reporter. I think she can do very well at it. But this not doing an interview right now, it is a real issue. It is a real issue for many voters. Maybe not down the line Democrats, but persuadables want to see the vice president have this interview.